one of the biggest challenge of living with HIV right from the time, the hard times, the harsh times of the early 90s when we knew our status, many of us, one of the biggest challenges is disclosing one's status to your children. It is a big challenge. Disclosing one's status to the significant people around you is the hardest thing that most women living with HIV confessed. And I personally had a challenge with that. And one of the things that we learned was that while we were opening up to other people in other spaces, at home we were not opening up to our children, particularly to the kids, leave alone the other family members. But our children were the ones that actually got to know last. And I know that my own children stumbled on my status after I had known it for 8 years. And they stumbled on it because they had read a newspaper where an article that was written about me, and the children read about it. We felt, as we went along in our journey of living with HIV, by the mid-90s, around 95, we felt in Nakola that was a big burden that we stood with, that it gave us such a huge sense of guilt that our children did not know. Personally, what I felt as an individual, before I introduced this to my colleagues, was I was always worried when my children get to know what will happen. The other thing that bothered me as an individual was that HIV shouldn't be what should define me. When I saw many of our colleagues who died of the bad symptoms those days, the last memory that children had, or they were told by older people, was how their mothers lost so much weight, how they had so much diarrhea. It was only the ugly part of their mothers' lives. That children were left with memories, especially in those days when there was a lot of death happening. When children were left when they were young, the only memory they had of their parents was they were dying of HIV. People who judged their parents, their mothers, people who reminded them of how their mothers died a miserable death. And what children had was this bad disease called HIV, which was associated with promiscuity and the kind of judgment language at the time. And my fear and my concern was that I was more than that my children did not have to remember me in a negative way. So for me, the pain was that my children needed to remember me as a loving mother, as a mother who cared. But what was important was I was there for them and I was a mother. So when I introduced this conversation to my colleagues, I realized that many mothers had that challenge. Even beyond what my fears were, some mothers had children who did not know their biological fathers, or they had passed on very early, and the mothers needed to communicate that to their children. When I moved, in the course of moving and searching, I landed on a project that was being done in the UK for cancer patients. They were writing memory books, by encouraging cancer patients to write memory books by some small project, I forget even their name. And I met the woman who headed that work. She actually, when I met her, she agreed to come to Uganda and look into how she could support us to do to write memory books. So through the chat with this woman, who I'm still in contact with, much as she's a very old lady, but she still has enthusiasm. We are looking at how we make the memory books digital because of the current developments in technology. So talking to this woman, she shared the experience of cancer patients and how hard it was for them in the UK to disclose to their children, particularly the African mothers who lived far away from home, who lived in so much fear, especially those who are immigrants in the UK. And they knew that their fear was when they were dying of cancer. We came up with this concept, but built on what the cancer team was doing in the UK, because it was quite limiting. Because cancer didn't have the judgmental aspects and the stigma that HIV brought. So we developed the idea beyond just a book. and we developed it into a project, that we felt it important to tell our story by ourselves to our children, that we did not have to wait for other people to tell that story their way, that it was a responsibility that we had as mothers to break the ice, to tell our children what we are going through, but also to be able to disclose our HIV status to our children. So the memory books are a tool. The memory book is a tool that enables you to tell the story yourself as a woman living with HIV, because other people will tell your story in a different way, in a way that benefits them. It gives you an opportunity to communicate to your children what really sits at the bottom of your heart. That with HIV, there's a lot that we bottle up and we don't know where to open up from, and we don't know, like a safe space to disclose your status to your children is so hard. The memory book provides that safe space, and it enables you to have a conversation with your children when you still have the energy. At that time, our focus was on survival. Our focus was on how long we would live, because we didn't have the advanced treatment of ART, which we're enjoying today. So it was an important part of our lives that we used it as an opportunity to communicate to our children. So in terms of writing the memory book, the audience for this story was our children. It still is our children, because it's important that children are part of this journey that we make as we live with HIV. So our children being the audience that we wrote these stories for, this is what the story is like. It is about right from what you are in your childhood. The first chapter is about your childhood, where you grew up, because children did not have this information. Because we died, those days we thought would die very early. Many of our colleagues died when the children were young. Children remained without having this kind of identity. Knowing where your parents come from is a source of identity, and it's a source of pride and self-esteem. So the first chapter is about enabling the children to know your childhood, the beautiful things about your childhood. The book is written in such a way that you actually put pictures of, if you have pictures or items that you can actually stick into the book that make the story lighter, so that the children they don't only get this bang about HIV, which they normally hear. So the childhood memories, where you went to school, where you grew up, who your friends were, those kinds of things that you start the story with a light moment, something that children are very proud of. It shows that you have been evolving. You are a living person. Most of the time people perceive us and they make our children perceive us like we are dying tomorrow. So that's another benefit of the memory book. The other thing is about children are able to know their roots. They're able to know where they come from. Through your story, your children are empowered to know where they come from. The other benefit of the memory book is that children become part of your support. They become your support in the journey of dealing with HIV. In my case, my daughter, particularly my second daughter, as early as 8 years, she was able to know the treatment that I was taking. I remember every morning she would ask me, "Mommy, did you take your Crixvan?" At the time, that was the treatment I was taking. "And did you remember to take?" Because in the book, I was able to tell my children why it was important for me to take this treatment and why it would benefit them. So my children are buddies. Up to now, even when I'm not living with my older girls, they are interested in my health. They keep checking in to know how I feel. They have even escalated it to involve their spouses, to the point that their husbands actually write to me. They will send a message to find out, "Mom, how are you doing?" Because the children have been part of this journey. Even when they've moved into a different space, they have involved their spouses in my life. The challenges of writing memory books. One, the first challenge I found as an individual was I promoted the project, but I was the slowest at sitting down to put together the pictures, to put together the story was a challenge for me. And sometimes you need support. So what we did, we got some women to support their colleagues to write their books. So you will find that it is actually not easy to sit down and put this together. Sometimes it also comes with a lot of emotions. There's a lot of emotions involved because there are things you may remember that are very painful, especially when you're talking about things like the loss of your spouse. And we found it useful to have women support each other and support their colleagues. That was mostly during that time when we had no hopes.